The ability for art to inspire knows no bounds. It is likely the biggest source of inspiration we have available to us. It is also able to completely enrich our lives. Art takes the mundane and the normal and splits it open, exposing what's beneath the surface and revealing the true beauty behind reality. Art gives us the ability to express things in ways that are not allowed within the confines of our reality. Specifically, aesthetic deals with particular styles of art where art is given a very general term. Aesthetic attempts to define and explore a specific canon of artistic work and put it under an umbrella that is the specific style. Let's explore one of these styles near and dear to my heart, but also the heart of many gamers and 80s babies the world over. Join me on my quest for cyberpunk. To start my quest, let's first define what exactly cyberpunk is, and then we'll continue to journey through particular pieces of work to see what they add to the cyberpunk canon and what separates them from the other pieces. We'll see how they carve a unique niche aesthetic that contribute to the clarity or robustness of cyberpunk as a whole. Cyberpunk emerged from the neon-scattered landscape of the 80s as an offshoot of science fiction. For the most part, the style follows one simple guide: high-tech, low-life. This particular guide is very malleable, but the constant is the high-tech. It's definitely an exploration of futuristic life found in science fiction, but the second low-life section is most often the area adapted and open to interpretation. It is also this section that is key from separating particular cyberpunk work from other generic sci-fi. Because of this, there ends up being quite a lot of variety within this particular canon of work. Cyberpunk fully embraces both words that compose it. The cyber deals with the sci-fi section of the themes of the work, while the punk injects its grittiness and rough DIY nature. There is certainly a lot of variable work within the cyberpunk catalog, but all the pieces of art will use the high-tech low-life approach to some extent, usually central to the world and narrative. From this approach also emerges particular themes that run constant throughout the body of work that is cyberpunk. These themes include class uprising, anarchy, corporate corruption, and transhumanism. The ideas that run parallel to the high-tech, low-life concept of creating cyberpunk artwork also act as constants to help further define and clarify exactly what cyberpunk is. Within these worlds, corporations wield more power than governments and often channel this power into shaping their world. While the corpos are busy plotting, the denizens of such worlds are often forced to interact with the corps, for better or worse, to climb what little social ladder remains. The whimsical elements of futurism are ever present within the body of cyberpunk. Cyberpunk was sprung to life in 1984. It's only fitting given its in-your-face retro neon style. Even the darker tones to the atmosphere and themes come straight from the 80s. It was with writer William Gibson's Neuromancer that the aesthetic known as cyberpunk began to take shape. Neuromancer's motifs displayed rampantly throughout its pages, particularly the setting of Chiba City and the character Case, really helped to set cyberpunk as an aesthetic apart from its science fiction compadres. The reason I cite Neuromancer before Ridley Scott's Blade Runner is that while Blade Runner basically invented the wheel of cyberpunk, it was Neuromancer that popularized it and legitimized it due to its literary nature. We'll quest for Blade Runner in another episode, but for now we'll dive into an oft-forgotten or not even acknowledged world of cyberpunk. The virtual universe of Second Life is definitely one of the last places within the world that one would think to discover some of the works of cyberpunk art. However, this is actually where I, as a kid, was first introduced to the aesthetic. It was in various goth or cyberpunk sims that I got to really endure the heavy streets of digital art inspired by the worlds of Scott and Gibson so many years ago. Only this time, it transcended the experience of film or literature and breathed digital life into the worlds explored in those titles. Just wandering through a cyber-inspired recreation of the city of Kowloon or sci-fi cyberpunk monoliths like in Silico is an experience like no other. An experience I would argue pays true homage to this beautiful aesthetic. With virtualizing the aesthetic comes the possibility of interjecting yourself onto the cyberpunk narrative or landscape. It granted the ability of creating the kind of world for yourself like Jahan Kid did with Hanger's Liquid. While cyberpunk role-playing games were adapted from the aesthetic as well, there was no kind of interactive media like gaming to really capture the beauty of the aesthetic. Starting with my favorite sim I mentioned already, Hanger's Liquid, let's explore the beautiful gritty streets of cyberpunk through the lens of Second Life. Keeping in mind its user-generated foundation, Second Life is probably the worst optimized game in existence, so the lag is very real in a lot of sims. It also deeply depends on the scope of the project, of which this one is massive. This is where we spawn into the sim. There's a bunch of info about Hanger's Liquid from Jahan Kid, the creator. And once we leave, we're free to explore this beautiful, wonderful work of art. The sim is actually a piece of a museum, and Kid has done some work for them outside of HL. The sheer amount of work that goes into a 5 Sims Second Life plot is unbelievable, and to consider most of this work was done by a single person, with the help of just a few more, is staggering. There's just so much to take in, from the shops scattered about to hangout spots like Les Artistes, and it's all easily accessible via flying taxis. The possibilities for roleplay are endless too, and while most have been played out, and the scene is quite dead, there's still sparks of it here and there, and who knows, maybe you could start a roleplay. This is probably the longest living cyberpunk sim, and sadly the other sims from my childhood seem to have gone the way of the teen grid. The roleplaying in Second Life is some of the best in gaming when it's actually pertinent. Of course, the game attracts all different types of players, and the outcome of roleplay can be quite different depending on who's involved. This is often where the cyberpunk on Second Life really thrives. There's many different sims that usually revolve around roleplay, and for the sake of roleplay, hours upon hours of creative work went into establishing the sims that they play out in. Take a look at this montage of smaller cyberpunk sims before we dive into Silico. Silico is another massive role-playing cyberpunk sim. Around the SL-verse, they get flack for their pretentiousness, but taking a good look at the sim, you'll see why. This place is absolutely massive, featuring multiple districts of the fictional city of Silico. It even features a shopping district replete with stores to spend your hard-earned lindens in. Like most sims of its size, it can get pretty laggy, but it's pretty well optimized for what it is. I shoot a lot of the shots in SL in this sim, and I always find something new when exploring the city. Just look at all this art. It truly is the best part of Second Life. All of the art one can experience, and this is a use case of art that is really unique, in that the experience would be utterly shallow without its augmentation. This is why roleplay is able to thrive to the degree that it does. Sims like Silico or Hanger's Liquid use art, specifically that of cyberpunk, to bring to life the aesthetics in the mind. We're able to fully realize the power and extent of roleplay in this setting, and it's a beautiful junction of art. Thanks for watching my showcase of cyberpunk within Second Life. There's more to come on not just cyberpunk, but plenty of aesthetics for all of us to dive into and feast our eyes and brains upon. Tune in next time to No Codex. Until then, take care.